Auzubillahi minash shaitani rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I welcome you all once again to another edition of our online class, and we shall continue with our discussion on apiculture or beekeeping. And the area we are going to be looking at will start from what we call the beehives. These beehives the bees makes their homes in any structure they find conducive to live in, and this structure could be on top of trees, under the roofs of abandoned houses, or under an empty containers we have equally abandoned for long, or any other type of structure they find suitable to live in. They are able to do this because they have this adaptable feature to live in any structure, and that's why man is able to produce a particular housing unit that this bee can be raised, that we refer to as the bee hive. And this housing unit is a kind of hollow-like box container that is used to accommodate these bees in order for production that they will produce, that is our target, can be easily collected. And there are three main types of these beehives. The first one is what we call the fixed combed hives, and this we will get from these natural habitats, and there is no how we can get the honeycomb from them without destroying this type of hive. The second one, it is called the removable comb hives with top bars. This hollow-like box container, we have with it what we call top bars. The picture shall be seen later. On top of it is around these top bars the bees going to build their honeycombs. And the third one is what we call the removable comb hives with frames. This hollow-like box, which is an housing unit for this bee, comes in another form, in form of frames and not top bars that the honeycombs are built around, that man can easily collect the honeycomb from to get our honey. And these are the three main types of these bee hives. So we shall see the pictures now. This is the top bars that will fix on the tops of the hollow-like box, which is the housing unit, or they come in form of this is the box unit. It is on top of this hollow-like box we arrange the frame inside, or we arrange the tall bars. But this other small one, this box is not for building the honeycombs by the bees, but we use this box to collect a migrating bees from one colony that we can transfer them to another bee hive, which they will start a new colony, and this box is called a swarm bee catcher. So it's going to have an handle to hang on any structure, and this is the entering point for these bees, and they will remain inside the box until they are transferred to another hive, which they will start off a new colony. Now the frame type is this that we are looking at here. This is a frame type of the beehive this beekeeper is holding. But with it, as we are seeing, it's just not an empty frame. The honeycombs has already been built around it, and this is the way to arrange them inside this hollow box. Around this, also inside there, production have started of building the honeycombs. These are the honey bees at work on top of the hives. Now that is the frame type we have seen. The box I've earlier shown, I've said the one you have seen, they are in pieces. They will be compacted together to give a single unit bee hive, and this one is called the Langstroth. In the last class I've mentioned some pioneer, which Langstroth is one of them, so this particular beehive is named after him. And aside it here is the top we are seeing. Until we remove it, that it will show us whether it's the frame type inside or the top bars types that is inside. So those are the three types of beehives that we have. So we'll go ahead now to look at the tools and equipment used in beekeeping. The first one I have here is the smoker. The major function of the smoker is to subdue the bees or calm them down during our hive inspection or the honeycomb harvesting from the bee hive. I have the knife. We are familiar with what a knife is. The major work it does is to cut off the comb from the top bars or the frame, as we have seen in the earlier pictures. Then we have the extractor. The extractor, the major role is to extract oil from the honeycomb cells after we have deposited the honeybee comb inside this machine, and is going to extract it by with the principle of using centrifugal force, carrying out a spinning action to force out the honey from each of these cells without destroying the honeycombs. Then we have the capping knife. In the first lesson, if you remember, I showed you a honeycomb which has in it honey, and there are two parts we saw in the last lesson: an area that was capped, sealed up, and an area that is uncapped or not sealed up. If production has been completed by these honeybees, they will seal up the surface of these honeycomb cells, which is the one that is ready for harvesting. Now, in order to remove the honey, especially using the extractor, these cells has to be uncapped first. The capping knife, the way it works is such that you move the knife over the surface of these honeycomb cells, and the wax on top of it are removed, so that the honey can easily be extracted when they are deposited inside the extractor. Then we have the honey container. The honey container is just any suitable container to collect the honey bee combs or to collect our honey after extraction. Then we have another tool called the hive tool. This hive tool is just a blunt stainless blade that is used to remove the hive tops during examination or during harvesting. The equipment. One important equipment here is the overall with a veil. That means the face part must be protected with a veil, and the overall is a cloth worn by the beekeeper to protect the entire body of the beekeeper. The glove will be worn on the hand to protect the hand. The rain boot will be worn on the leg to protect the legs. And these are the pictures we are going to see now of these tools and equipment. The first one I have here is the smoker, and this smoker is to subdue the bees during our inspection of the beehive or harvesting. And how does it work? Inside this container is a flammable material. We will get the flame will be ignited, and the smoke produced from this mouth part through the pressing of this valve here to create the air inside and blow the smoke out of the mouth part. And that is a modern smoker. A local smoker can equally be used, and this is the dry oil palm bunch. After the removal of the oil palm fruit from it, it's equally flammable when lighted, and it will generate the smoke that we need to carry out the subduing of this bee during our activity with the bee hive. The next one here is what I call the extractor, and the extractor is to extract the honey from the honey combs after uncapping the honeycomb cell. And these are the honeycombs inside the extractor to be spinned, and for the honey to come out from this outlet and collected in a honey container for onward storage. The next tool here is what we call the hive tool, and as I've said earlier, to remove tops or any other part of the hive during examination or harvesting. Then the equipment. One major equipment is this overall, and part of this overall we will have the cap or the hat to be worn on the head, and they are sewn together. The essence of this hat is to protect the head against either rain or sun, and the face is protected with a net-like material so as to prevent the sting of the bee on the face, and for the beekeeper to see the operation is carrying out. And the other parts are clothing material that will be used to cover the entire body. The hand will equally protected, because as we are seeing now, the hand is not protected. The hand will be protected, so also the leg will equally be protected. And protecting the leg, we have what we call the rain boots, or the boots that will be worn on the leg to protect the leg. Then we have the hand glove to protect the hand during harvesting, to prevent stinging by the bees. Now we will go ahead and look at method of beekeeping. There are two major methods of beekeeping. The first one is the traditional method of beekeeping. In this particular method, the bee remain in their natural habitat, and both the management of this honey bee and production of honey from them is very, very low. Very, very low, because as I've said, in that natural habitat, there's no how we harvest the honey, harvest the honeycomb without destroying that particular habitat. So the habitat is destroyed. It takes a lot of activity for them to build up another honey bee comb, and that's why production under this method is very, very low. But with the modern method, because we use a modern housing unit, or what we call the beehive, to raise this honey bee, which we call the lancet that we have seen earlier, which have the removable frames or the removable top bars. It means that we can easily remove our honey from these honeycombs and return them back, and production continue, such that they can produce as many times in a production season. And that's why honey production under this method is very high. And those are the two methods that we can use to keep our honey bees. Now we'll go over to look at precautionary measure or safety measure in beekeeping. What are those safety measure we put in place when we establish an apiary. So the first thing is to locate this apiary or beehive away from residential locations. Around where we know people live, we don't set such a place as an apiary where we raise our bees, because the bees, they will always want to defend their own territory, and the only way they do that is to sting any intruder that comes around such location. So another safety measure is to put warning symbols around our apiary to ward off man from such area, to prevent being attacked by these bees. So also we need to put up a safety measure to protect the beekeeper, who has no choice but to always visit the apiary or the location of these bee hives by wearing protective covering to guide against the stings of these bees. The use of smoker is to make these bees calm, such that man can carry out the activity while in the apiary. The next one is keeping the hive away from wet ground. The material used in constructing this beehive are majorly wooden material, and wooden material can get destroyed when they are in contact with a wet surface, and that's why it is always best to erect a iron stand for our beehive to be placed on them, so that these beehives last long. And lastly, the location where we want to keep these beehives should be an accessible location to the beekeeper for so many reasons, either to not to pose hindrance in visiting the beehive regularly, or to easily move the bee combs from the apiary to the production or the processing center. And these are the precautionary measures the beekeeper needs to ensure. Now, the next stage, having looked at the safety measures, is now how do we go about harvesting our honey. When we want to harvest honey, what we harvest is the carved honey combs, which we have seen in the first class. Production by this honeybee only ends when they carve all the honeycomb cell after depositing the honey inside. So during the harvesting, we start from one side of the hive and gradually move to other hives, and as we are doing that, we will make use of a tool called the hive tool to remove the turbars or the frame, so that it will enable us to lift it up and cut the honeycombs with a knife and drop them in a clean container that we call the honey container, and that is harvesting of honey. So now we'll go over to how do we process, how do we store our honey. The processing of honey has to take place in a well screened location, where all the doors or the windows or any other form of entries we have there are well covered with a mosquito net, so that the bees does not have access to such a place, in order not to contaminate the honey we are processing or to sting the person carrying out the processing, because the odor of the honey also attracts the honeybee. The processing is done via two methods, and the first one could be a local one, and in this local method of processing, what we first need is to, after getting the honeybee combs, we will crush them using a stick, and after the crushing, we pack bit by bit of this crushed honey combs into a filter cloth or what we call the methylene cloth, the type of cloth we use in sieving our cornstarch at home. Then use our hand to properly press it very well in order to extract the honey from it. Or we may make use of what we call honey press, such that with this type of honey press, that is usually have an outlet base in which the extracted honey will comes out, and we collect them in clean containers. Then after all this honey, we have to allow it to stand for a while. The essence of allowing it to stand for a while is that during this extraction, we will have some foams inside this honey. These foams will have to be scraped off, and we cannot get rid of them totally without allowing the honey to stead for some time. When it properly settled, these foams will always on top. We can scrape them off. We can use it to coat the bee hive again in order to quickly attract the honey to start another production. It also has a cosmetic use in treating some skin diseases, and this is not a waste, it's also a good raw material for man. Now, after they have properly settled that the foaming part separate out from the honey, then we can then store our honey in clean bottles or airtight containers. Honey on its own can stand for a very long time if it is a good quality honey. And that is that about processing and harvesting, processing and storage of honey, Now we will not end the class by not looking at these important aspects that I call swarming. Swarming is one important behavior of our honey bees, and this happens when there is overcrowding in the bee hive. So we have a mass of this honey bee leaving the hive with a queen to establish a new colony, and that's why I've shown on display that honeybee swarm catcher, which is always used to collect a swarming bees, and beekeeper can easily collect them in such type of box and locate them into another new hive where they will start up a new colony. And this is how we will go on this edition of our online class. So with this, we have come to the end of all the topics required of us to look at as our syllabus in agricultural science. And inshallah, subsequent lesson will be featuring revisions from different aspects of the topics we have learned in the previous years. I pray to Almighty Allah to grant you a better understanding of the lesson than is actually been delivered. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. See you next class.